Marcus Chen stood at attention in the crystalline throne room of the Zephyrian royal palace, his worn military uniform a stark contrast to the gleaming walls that seemed to breathe with their own inner light. 3 years had passed since the Treaty of Proxima ended the bloodiest conflict the galaxy had ever seen, but the scars on his weathered face told the story of every battle he had fought. The Zephyrian king, Veltar the Magnificent, towered 12 feet above the polished floor on his floating throne. His 6 arms moved in graceful arcs as he spoke, each gesture carrying the weight of absolute authority over 17 star systems. The translation device at Marcus's ear converted the alien's melodic tones into crisp English. "Human Marcus Chen," the king announced, his voice echoing through the chamber filled with courtiers from a dozen different species. "You have served your people with distinction. Your actions during the siege of Kepler 442b saved countless lives, both human and alien alike." Marcus remained silent, his military training keeping him perfectly still despite the curious stares from the assembled dignitaries. He had been summoned here for what the diplomatic corps called a ceremony of recognition, though none of them could explain exactly what that meant in Zephyrian culture. The king continued, "According to our ancient traditions, a warrior who shows such honor must be rewarded. I have chosen something special for you, something that will demonstrate the bond between our peoples." A side door hissed open, and 2 Zephyrian guards entered, leading something on a thick metal chain. Marcus's eyes widened as he saw the creature they brought forward. It looked like a cross between a wolf and a dragon, standing nearly 4 feet at the shoulder. Its fur was jet black with patches of silver that seemed to move like liquid mercury. Red eyes glowed with an intelligence that made Marcus's skin crawl. The assembled court fell silent, and Marcus could hear several gasps of shock from the alien dignitaries. The translation device picked up scattered whispers in various languages, most containing words that his device marked as extremely negative or curse words. "This," King Veltar announced with obvious satisfaction, "is a Shadowhound of Zareth. They are known throughout the galaxy for their unique temperament." One of the Zephyrian courtiers stepped forward, bowing deeply. "My lord, perhaps we should explain to the human that Shadowhounds are—" "Silence," the king commanded, raising one of his 6 hands. "The gift has been chosen. Human Marcus Chen, this creature is now yours to care for as you see fit. May it bring you the same joy it has brought to my court." The sarcasm in the king's voice was thick enough to cut with a knife, even through the translation device. Marcus began to understand that this wasn't exactly an honor. The other aliens in the room looked at him with expressions that ranged from pity to barely concealed amusement. The guards released the chain and quickly stepped back. The Shadowhound immediately lunged toward the nearest group of courtiers, causing them to scatter in panic. Its jaws snapped at the air, revealing teeth like black glass. When it turned its attention to Marcus, everyone in the room held their breath. Marcus had faced down charging Craxian battle beasts and survived the toxic swamps of Meridian 7. He had earned 17 different medals for courage under fire and had never retreated from any enemy. But, as this creature stalked toward him, its red eyes boring into his soul, he felt a chill run down his spine. The Shadowhound stopped 3 feet away from him and began to circle, its nose working constantly. Marcus could hear its breathing, which sounded like steam escaping from a broken pipe. The fur along its back stood on end, and its tail lashed back and forth like an angry serpent. "They are extremely aggressive," King Veltar explained, his voice filled with false sympathy. "This particular specimen has already injured 6 handlers and destroyed 3 sets of containment equipment. We have been struggling to find an appropriate home for it." Marcus watched as the creature completed its circle and sat back on its haunches, still staring at him. He had grown up on a farm on Earth's colony world of New Montana, where his family raised horses and cattle. His father had taught him that you could learn everything you needed to know about an animal by looking in its eyes. This creature's eyes held intelligence, certainly, but also something else. Pain. Loneliness. A deep, abiding anger at the world. "What's its name?" Marcus asked quietly. The king's laughter was like the sound of wind chimes in a hurricane. "Name? Humans are such peculiar creatures. It has no name. It is simply another failed experiment from the Zareth gene modification program. A biological weapon that proved too unstable for military use." The Shadowhound's ears perked up at the mention of Zareth, and Marcus saw something flicker in those red eyes. Recognition. Understanding. The creature had understood at least part of the conversation. Failed experiment, Marcus repeated, looking directly at the creature. Unwanted. Too dangerous for normal people to handle. He knelt slowly, bringing himself closer to eye level with the Shadow Hound. Sounds familiar. The alien courtiers murmured nervously as Marcus extended his hand toward the creature. Several of them moved toward the exits, clearly expecting violence. The Shadow Hound sniffed his outstretched fingers, its nostrils flaring. For a moment, the only sound in the vast chamber was the creature's breathing. Then, to everyone's amazement, the Shadow Hound gently touched its nose to Marcus's palm. Incredible, whispered one of the Zephyrian scientists. It has never shown such behavior before. Marcus slowly stood, keeping his hand extended. The Shadow Hound rose with him, maintaining contact. I'll call you Shadow, he said softly. How's that sound? The creature's tail stopped lashing. Its ears, which had been pinned back against its skull, relaxed slightly. The red glow in its eyes seemed to dim to a more natural amber color. King Veltar's expression shifted from amusement to something approaching concern. Perhaps I should mention that Shadowhounds form extremely strong bonds with their handlers. Once bonded, they become protective. Extremely protective. Some might say possessively so. Marcus looked up at the towering monarch and smiled grimly. Your Majesty, I've spent the last 5 years of my life protecting things. People, places, ideals. Having something that wants to protect me for a change might be exactly what I need. The king's 6 arms gestured in what Marcus had learned was the Zephyrian equivalent of a shrug. Very well. The creature is yours, along with its feeding instructions and containment protocols. I trust you will find the experience educational. As Marcus left the throne room with Shadow walking calmly beside him, he heard the king speaking quietly to one of his advisors. The translation device caught fragments, typical human arrogance. And, won't last a week. And, should have warned him about the telepathic link. Telepathic link? Marcus paused in the corridor, looking down at Shadow. The creature looked back up at him, and, for just a moment, Marcus could have sworn he heard something that wasn't quite a voice whisper in his mind. Finally. Someone who understands. The massive doors of the palace closed behind them as Marcus and Shadow stepped out into the alien cityscape of Zephyr Prime. The capital city stretched out before them in impossible spirals and floating platforms, all connected by streams of light that served as transportation for the flying inhabitants. It was beautiful in an otherworldly way, but it wasn't home. Well, Shadow, Marcus said, adjusting the creature's chain leash. I guess we're both a long way from where we belong. Shadow looked up at him with those intelligent amber eyes, and Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since before the war began. Not quite happiness, but something close to it. Purpose, maybe. Or simply the knowledge that he wasn't alone anymore. As they walked through the alien streets, Marcus began to notice things. Shadow's ears swiveled constantly, tracking sounds that Marcus couldn't hear. The creature's nose worked overtime, cataloging scents that were invisible to human senses. When a group of Craxian traders passed too close, Shadow smoothly positioned itself between them and Marcus, not threateningly, but clearly protective. They found lodging at a boarding house that catered to off-world visitors. The Altarian proprietor, a bird-like creature with iridescent feathers, took one look at Shadow and quoted a price that was 3 times the normal rate. Dangerous creature tax, she explained in heavily accented galactic standard. Plus security deposit for damages. Plus insurance surcharge. Plus, I get it, Marcus interrupted, pulling out his credit chip. He had enough saved up from his military service to cover the expenses, at least for a while. Their room was small and spartanly furnished, with a single bed, a small table, and a window that looked out over the city's lower levels. Marcus set his duffel bag on the table and turned to Shadow, who was methodically sniffing every corner of the room. So, Marcus said, sitting on the edge of the bed. Telepathic link, huh? The king mentioned that like it was supposed to scare me. Shadow finished his inspection and padded over to sit in front of Marcus. Those amber eyes fixed on his face with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. I've had worse things in my head, Marcus continued. combat stims, neural interfaces, battlefield coordination networks. If you want to take a look around up there, be my guest. Just don't be surprised by what you find. The sensation started as a gentle pressure behind his eyes, then, gradually became something more complex. It wasn't like hearing a voice or seeing images. It was more like suddenly remembering something he had always known but had forgotten. Shadow's memories began to blend with his own. Flashes of the Zareth laboratory. Scientists in environmental suits surrounding a tank full of glowing fluid. Pain. Lots of pain. Needles and probes and electric shocks. Other creatures in similar tanks, most of them dying. The knowledge that he was an experiment, a thing to be used and discarded. Then, the military training. Hours of conditioning designed to make him into a perfect weapon. Hunger used as motivation. Pain used as punishment. The gradual realization that he was too intelligent for their purposes, that he could think and question and resist. The handlers who feared him. The containment cells that grew stronger and more elaborate each time he escaped. The growing certainty that he would never be allowed to exist freely, that his entire existence would be nothing but labs and cells, and the clinical observation of creatures who saw him as nothing more than a dangerous tool. Marcus felt his own memories flowing back through the connection. The farm on New Montana where he had grown up. His parents, who had died in a transport accident when he was 19. His sister, who had stopped writing letters during the second year of the war. The friends he had lost in battle. The nights he lay awake wondering if there was any point to the fighting. The connection lasted only a few minutes, but, when it ended, both of them were changed. Marcus looked at Shadow with new understanding, and Shadow's posture had relaxed in a way that spoke of trust finally found. "So we're both soldiers without a war," Marcus said softly. "Both of us made for fighting, but not sure what we're supposed to do now that the fighting's over." Shadow moved closer and laid his massive head on Marcus's knee. For the first time since leaving Earth, Marcus felt like he might actually belong somewhere. Outside their window, the alien city hummed with life. Somewhere in the distance, a transport ship lifted off for the outer colonies, carrying passengers to new worlds and new possibilities. Marcus scratched Shadow behind the ears and began to plan their next move. They would need work. They would need a purpose. Most importantly, they would need to figure out what two warriors were supposed to do in a galaxy that was finally at peace. But, for now, it was enough to know that neither of them would have to face whatever came next alone. 3 weeks after leaving Zephyr Prime, Marcus and Shadow found themselves on Terminus Station, a massive commercial hub that served as the crossroads for half the galaxy's trade routes. The station was a city in space, home to over 2 million beings from hundreds of different species, all trying to make a living in the post-war economy. Marcus had burned through most of his savings getting them this far. The transport companies all charged extra for exotic companion animals, and Shadow's dietary requirements were expensive. Shadowhounds needed a specific blend of proteins that could only be found in certain types of alien livestock, and those weren't cheap on a space station where everything had to be imported. They had taken up residence in the station's cargo district, where the rent was cheaper and the neighbors were too busy to ask questions. Their apartment was barely large enough for Marcus's bed and Shadow's sleeping area, but it was theirs. Finding work had proven more difficult than Marcus expected. His military record was impressive, but most security companies were hesitant to hire someone with a Shadowhound companion. The creature's reputation preceded them wherever they went. Even species that had never encountered a Shadowhound seemed to instinctively recognize something dangerous about Shadow. Marcus was reviewing job postings on his datapad when Shadow's head suddenly snapped up, ears pricked forward. A low growl rumbled in the creature's throat, so deep that Marcus felt it in his bones rather than heard it. "What is it, boy?" Marcus asked, following Shadow's gaze toward the apartment's single window. Through the reinforced transparent aluminum, Marcus could see the station's central plaza 3 levels below. A crowd had gathered around something, but, from this angle, he couldn't make out what was happening. Shadow's growl intensified, and, through their mental link, Marcus caught flashes of images. Fear. Panic. Something wrong happening in the plaza. Without hesitation, Marcus grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. Shadow was already there, waiting. They took the lift down to the plaza level, Shadow's agitation growing with each floor they descended. By the time the doors opened, Marcus could hear the commotion. Screams, shouts, and the distinctive whine of security barriers being erected. The crowd parted as they approached, beings of all species stepping quickly aside when they saw Shadow. Marcus pushed through to the front and saw what was causing the panic. A Thanarian child, no more than 8 years old by Marcus's estimation, was trapped on top of a damaged maintenance drone that had malfunctioned and was now hovering 20 feet above the plaza floor. The drone's anti-gravity systems were failing intermittently, causing it to bob up and down unpredictably. Each time it dropped, the child screamed and clung tighter to the smooth metal surface. Station security had arrived, but they were clearly out of their depth. The Thanarian species were small and lightweight, with delicate bones that couldn't survive a fall from that height. The security chief, a gruff centaurian with 4 arms, was barking orders at his subordinates. "Get me a grav lift. Where's the emergency response team? Someone shut down that drone before it kills the kid." "Sir," one of the security officers called out, "the drone's control systems are completely fried. We can't shut it down remotely, and if we hit it with a disruptor, it'll drop like a rock." Marcus studied the situation. The drone was too high for anyone to reach, even with the portable grab lifts the security team was setting up. The child was crying, calling for its parents in the musical language of the Thanarians. Time was running out. "Shadow," Marcus said quietly, "can you jump that high?" Through their link, Marcus felt Shadow's assessment. The creature could make the jump, but landing on the drone would likely destabilize it further. Landing safely with a passenger would be nearly impossible. Marcus looked around the plaza, noting the architectural features. The walls were lined with decorative ledges and support beams, creating a kind of three-dimensional obstacle course. An idea began to form. "Excuse me," Marcus said to the security chief. "I think I can help." The Centaurian looked him up and down, taking in Marcus's obvious human features and Shadow's imposing presence. "Unless you can fly, citizen, I don't see how." Marcus pointed to the wall nearest the drone. "I can climb. Give me 5 minutes, and I'll have that kid down safely." "Absolutely not," the security chief snapped. "This is an official emergency response. We don't need civilians getting in the way." A new voice cut through the crowd. "Let him try." Marcus turned to see an elderly Thanarian pushing through the gathered beings. The creature stood barely 4 feet tall, with iridescent scales and large, expressive eyes that were filled with desperate hope. "That's my grandchild up there," the Thanarian said, his voice translator giving his words a musical quality despite the obvious distress. "If this human thinks he can help, please, let him try." The security chief looked from the Thanarian grandfather to Marcus, clearly torn between protocol and pragmatism. The drone chose that moment to drop another 2 feet, causing the child to scream again. That decided it. "Fine," the Centaurian growled. "But if you get yourself killed, don't expect us to explain it to your next of kin." Marcus was already moving toward the wall, Shadow close behind him. The decorative ledges were spaced about 8 feet apart, challenging but manageable for someone with his training. The trick would be timing his movements to intercept the drone when it was at the right height and position. He began to climb, using the techniques he had learned during urban warfare training on Kepler 442b. Shadow followed, his claws finding purchase on the textured wall surface with an ease that made several onlookers gasp in amazement. Shadowhounds, apparently, were natural climbers. As they ascended, Marcus could hear the security team below setting up safety nets, though he doubted they would be much help if something went wrong. The drone continued its erratic hovering pattern, the child clinging desperately to its surface. When Marcus reached a height level with the drone, he paused on a narrow ledge to study its movement pattern. It was rising and falling in a roughly predictable cycle, but the lateral drift was random. He would have one chance to make this work. Through their mental link, Shadow communicated a complex plan. The creature would leap to a higher ledge and wait. When the drone was in the right position, Shadow would jump down and land on its surface. The added weight would cause it to drop, but in a controlled fashion. Marcus would intercept the child during the descent. It was risky, requiring split-second timing and perfect coordination. If they missed, both the child and Marcus could be seriously injured or killed. But it was the only plan that had a realistic chance of success. Marcus nodded, and Shadow began moving to the higher position. The creature's movements were so fluid and silent that he seemed to flow up the wall rather than climb it. Several floors above, Shadow found a suitable perch and crouched, ready to spring. The drone bobbed upward, bringing the child to within 10 feet of Marcus's position. Through the mental link, he felt Shadow's intense focus, like a predator preparing to strike. The creature was calculating angles, velocities, and timing with a precision that was almost supernatural. "Now," Marcus whispered. Shadow launched himself from his perch with explosive force, covering the distance to the drone in a single, perfect arc. He landed on the device's rear edge, his claws finding purchase on the metal surface. The additional weight caused the drone to tilt and begin a controlled descent. Marcus timed his own jump perfectly, leaping from his ledge as the drone passed through his intercept point. His arms closed around the terrified child just as Shadow released his grip and rolled away to land safely on another ledge. The momentum carried Marcus and the child toward the far wall, where Marcus managed to grab another decorative outcropping with one hand. His shoulders screamed in protest as their combined weight jerked against his grip, but his augmented military physiology held. Hand over hand, Marcus descended the remaining distance to the plaza floor. The crowd erupted in cheers as he handed the uninjured child to its grandfather. The old Thanarian's eyes filled with tears as he clutched his grandchild close. "Thank you," the grandfather said, his musical voice trembling with emotion. "I cannot express my gratitude. You and your companion risked everything for someone you had never met." Marcus felt embarrassed by the attention. Anyone would have done the same thing. The security chief approached, his expression a mixture of admiration and annoyance. "That was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've ever seen," he said. "Probably both." Shadow dropped down from his perch and padded over to Marcus's side. Through their link, Marcus felt the creature's satisfaction at a job well done, tinged with concern for Marcus's jarred shoulder. As the crowd began to disperse, a new figure approached them. She was human, middle-aged, with the kind of bearing that spoke of military training. Her clothes were civilian, but Marcus recognized the way she moved and the way her eyes constantly scanned for threats. "Impressive work," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Colonel Sarah Martinez, retired. I run a private security company here on Terminus Station." Marcus shook her hand, noting the firm grip and the way she didn't flinch when Shadow moved closer. "Marcus Chen, also retired. This is Shadow." "I know who you are," Martinez said with a slight smile. "Your reputation precedes you. Both of your reputations. I've been looking for someone with your particular skill set." She handed him a business card made of actual paper, an expensive affectation in a digital age. "I have a proposition for you. Something that might be more interesting than the usual security work." Marcus glanced at the card. Martinez Security Solutions Specialized Problem Resolution. He looked back up at her. "What kind of problems?" "The kind that require someone who can think outside the box," Martinez said. "Someone who isn't afraid to take risks. Someone who has a partner that the galaxy's criminal element hasn't figured out how to handle yet." She gestured toward Shadow, who was sitting calmly but alert, watching the flow of foot traffic around them. Shadowhounds have been extinct for over 50 years, except for the few specimens in Zareth research facilities. Most beings have never seen one in person. That makes them an unknown quantity, which can be very useful in our line of work. Marcus was intrigued despite himself. "What exactly is your line of work?" "We handle situations that are too complex or too sensitive for regular law enforcement," Martinez explained. "Corporate espionage, missing persons, stolen technology, diplomatic security. The kind of cases where having a unique edge can mean the difference between success and failure." She paused, studying Marcus's expression. "I saw what you just did. That wasn't just courage or training. That was the kind of creative problem-solving that only comes from someone who's been in impossible situations and found a way through them. I could use someone like that." Marcus looked down at Shadow, who met his gaze with those intelligent amber eyes. Through their link, he felt the creature's interest. Shadow was as tired of sitting around their tiny apartment as Marcus was. "What's the pay like?" Marcus asked practically. Martinez smiled. "Better than anything you'll find posting guard duty at a corporate office. Plus full medical coverage, equipment allowances, and performance bonuses. Are you interested?" Marcus thought about their dwindling savings, their expensive living situation, and the growing frustration he felt at being unemployed. More than that, he thought about the feeling of purpose he had just experienced while helping the Thanarian child. The sense that his skills and Shadow's abilities could be used for something meaningful. "Tell me more about this specialized problem resolution," he said. Martinez's smile widened. "Why don't you and Shadow come by my office tomorrow morning? I have a case that just came in that would be perfect for testing your capabilities. Consider it a trial run." As she walked away, Marcus looked down at Shadow again. The creature's tail was actually wagging slightly, the first time Marcus had seen such behavior from him. "What do you think, boy? Ready to get back to work?" Through their mental link, Shadow's response was clear. He was more than ready. He was eager. For the first time since leaving Zephyr Prime, Marcus felt like they were heading in the right direction. The galaxy was full of problems that needed solving, and he and Shadow were perfectly equipped to solve them. All they needed was the chance to prove it. The next morning couldn't come soon enough. 6 months later, Marcus Chen and Shadow had become legends on Terminus Station. Their reputation for solving impossible cases had spread throughout the sector, and Martinez Security Solutions was booking more high-profile contracts than they could handle. Their latest case had started like many others, a missing person who seemed to have vanished without a trace. Dr. Keth Valerian, a prominent Altarian scientist, had disappeared from his laboratory 3 days ago, leaving behind only an empty research facility and a lot of unanswered questions. What made this case different was the client. Ambassador Velnara of the Galactic Council had personally requested Marcus and Shadow for the investigation. The same Galactic Council that had been skeptical of human inclusion in galactic affairs since the end of the war. Marcus stood in Dr. Valorian's laboratory, studying the scene while Shadow conducted his own investigation using senses that far exceeded any technological scanner. The lab was pristine, too pristine. Someone had cleaned it thoroughly, but not thoroughly enough to fool a Shadowhound's enhanced perception. The official investigation found nothing, Ambassador Velnara said, her serpentine form coiled nervously near the laboratory entrance. No signs of struggle, no evidence of forced entry, no indication of where Dr. Valerian might have gone. Marcus nodded, watching Shadow work. The creature was moving systematically through the laboratory, his nose working constantly. Every few seconds, Shadow would pause at a particular spot, his ears flicking forward with interest. "Tell me about Dr. Valorian's research," Marcus said. "What was he working on that might have made him a target?" The ambassador's scales shifted color slightly, a sign of discomfort in her species. "His work was classified, but, given the circumstances, I can share some details. He was developing new applications for quantum consciousness transfer technology." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Mind uploading? That's been theoretical for centuries." "Not anymore," Velnara replied. Dr. Valerian had achieved successful consciousness transfer in laboratory animals. He was preparing to begin trials with sapient subjects. Through their mental link, Marcus felt Shadow's sudden intense focus. The creature had found something. Marcus walked over to where Shadow was standing, next to what appeared to be an empty workbench. Shadow looked up at him with those amber eyes, and Marcus caught a flash of scent memory through their connection. Blood. Recently spilled blood, expertly cleaned but not quite eliminated. Someone had been injured here, badly enough to leave traces that only Shadow could detect. "Your investigation team missed something," Marcus said quietly. "There was violence here. Someone was hurt." Ambassador Velnara slithered closer, her concern evident. "Are you certain?" "Our scanners detected no biological traces." Marcus scratched Shadow behind the ears, feeling the creature's confidence through their link. "Shadow's never wrong about these things. The question is, was it Dr. Valerian who was injured, or someone else? Shadow moved to a different part of the laboratory, this time stopping near a wall-mounted storage unit. His posture changed, becoming more alert and focused. Through their connection, Marcus felt a new sense signature. Fear sweat from a Craxian. Recent, maybe hours old. You had Craxian investigators here today, Marcus said, turning to the ambassador. Yes, Detective Throg examined the scene this morning. How could you possibly know that? Marcus smiled grimly. Lucky guess. But, here's what's interesting. Shadow can smell that your detective was afraid when he was in this room. Question is, afraid of what he might find, or afraid of what he already knew? The ambassador's scales shifted through several color combinations, indicating deep thought. You're suggesting that Detective Throg is somehow involved in Dr. Valorian's disappearance? I'm not suggesting anything yet, Marcus replied. But, I think we need to have a conversation with the good detective. Shadow suddenly went rigid, a low growl building in his throat. His attention was focused on the laboratory's main entrance, and, through their link, Marcus felt the approach of multiple hostiles. Armed. Moving with tactical precision. We need to leave, Marcus said urgently, grabbing Ambassador Velnara's arm. Right now. What? Why? I don't understand. The laboratory's lights went out, plunging them into darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, casting everything in a red glow that made Shadow's eyes appear to burn like coals. Because, Marcus said, drawing the plasma pistol from his shoulder holster, we're about to have company. The first attackers came through the main entrance, 6 Craxian mercenaries in full combat armor, carrying military-grade energy weapons. They moved with the kind of coordination that spoke of extensive training and recent combat experience. Shadow was already in motion, his black form blending with the shadows cast by the emergency lighting. The first mercenary didn't even see him coming. One moment the Craxian was advancing through the doorway, the next he was on the ground with Shadow's jaws clamped around his weapon arm. Marcus used the distraction to put 3 plasma bolts into the second attacker's center mass. The mercenary's armor absorbed most of the impact, but the kinetic force sent him stumbling backward into his companions. Stay behind me, Marcus shouted to Ambassador Velnara, who had coiled herself behind an overturned table. The remaining attackers split up, trying to flank them from multiple directions. Marcus found himself in a running firefight among the laboratory equipment, using his military training to maximum advantage. The mercenaries were good, but they were fighting in an enclosed space against opponents they didn't understand. Shadow was a nightmare in the red-lit laboratory. The creature moved like liquid death, appearing and disappearing among the shadows, striking at the mercenaries when they least expected it. His telepathic link with Marcus allowed them to coordinate their attacks with a precision that the mercenaries couldn't match. The fight was over in less than 3 minutes. 5 mercenaries were down, and the 6th was trapped under a piece of laboratory equipment that Shadow had somehow managed to topple onto him. The creature sat next to the trapped Craxian, growling softly whenever he tried to move. Marcus knelt beside the conscious mercenary and pressed his plasma pistol to the alien's forehead. Here's how this is going to work. You're going to tell me who sent you and why. If I like your answers, you get to live. The Craxian's eyes darted between Marcus and Shadow, clearly trying to decide which posed the greater threat. You don't understand what you're interfering with, human. This is bigger than you know. Then, explain it to me, Marcus said patiently. Dr. Valorian's research, it wasn't just about consciousness transfer. He discovered something about human neural patterns. Something that makes your species different. Ambassador Velnara slithered closer, her scales now showing patterns of intense curiosity. Different how? The mercenary laughed bitterly. You really don't know, do you? Humans are the only species in the galaxy whose consciousness can be transferred without degradation. Every other race loses something essential in the process. But, humans come through intact. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. That's why someone wanted Dr. Valorian's research. Not someone, the mercenary corrected. The hegemony. They want to create an army of uploaded human consciousnesses. Immortal soldiers who can be transferred between bodies, who can't be permanently killed, who retain all their memories and skills through multiple deaths. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. An army of immortal human soldiers under hegemony control could conquer the entire galaxy. Every military advantage that humanity had demonstrated during the war, multiplied by effective immortality. "Where is Dr. Valerian?" Marcus demanded. "Dead," the mercenary replied flatly. He refused to cooperate. "But they have his research data. They're already beginning the first trials." Shadow suddenly raised his head, ears pricked forward. Through their link, Marcus felt the approach of more hostiles. A lot more. "We need to go," Marcus said, hauling Ambassador Velnara to her feet. "Can you get us off station?" "My diplomatic transport is in Docking Bay 7, she replied, her scale showing patterns of fear and determination. "But, if what he's saying is true, we need to warn the Galactic Council." They made their way through the station's service corridors, avoiding the main thoroughfares where hegemony agents would be waiting. Shadow ranged ahead, using his enhanced senses to scout for threats. Twice they had to detour around groups of armed beings who were obviously searching for them. As they moved, Marcus's mind was racing. The hegemony had always been humanity's greatest enemy, a coalition of species that believed in genetic purity and species segregation. They had been the driving force behind the war, and their defeat had been one of humanity's greatest achievements. If they had Dr. Valorian's research, they could turn humanity's greatest strength against the galaxy itself. They reached Docking Bay 7 without further incident, but, as the ambassador's transport powered up for departure, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. "I need to contact Earth Command," he told Velnara. "This information needs to reach the human military immediately." Of course, the ambassador agreed. "But, first, we must inform the Galactic Council." "They have resources that—" "No," Marcus interrupted. "First, we warn Earth. Then, we figure out how to stop this." As their transport jumped to hyperspace, Marcus sat with Shadow at his side, thinking about the irony of their situation. King Veltar had given him what he thought was a burden, a dangerous creature that would cause nothing but trouble. Instead, he had given Marcus a partner who had just helped uncover a threat to the entire galaxy. Shadow's unique abilities had made it possible to detect clues that normal investigators would have missed. Their telepathic bond had allowed them to coordinate their response in ways that would have been impossible otherwise. Marcus looked down at Shadow, who met his gaze with those intelligent amber eyes. Through their link, he felt the creature's grim satisfaction. They had work to do, important work. The galaxy was in danger, and they were uniquely equipped to do something about it. "Ready for the big leagues, boy?" Marcus asked softly. Shadow's response came through their mental connection, clear and determined. He was ready for anything, as long as they faced it together. 3 days later, Marcus and Shadow stood in the briefing room of Earth Command's most secure facility. Around them were gathered the highest-ranking military officers in human space, along with Ambassador Velnara and representatives from a dozen allied species. The evidence they had gathered painted a picture of a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of galactic government. The hegemony had infiltrated research institutions throughout the galaxy, searching for the secret of human consciousness transfer. Dr. Valerian had been just one of many scientists working on pieces of the puzzle. "The question," said Admiral Chen, no relation, despite the shared name, "is what we do about it." Marcus stood, Shadow at his side. "With respect, Admiral, I think the answer is obvious. We find their research facility and we shut it down. Hard." "This isn't a military operation, Mr. Chen," one of the civilian advisors protested. "We need to work through diplomatic channels, build a coalition." "They're building an army of immortal human soldiers," Marcus interrupted. "Diplomatic channels aren't going to stop that." Ambassador Velnara spoke up, her scale showing patterns of resolution. "The Galactic Council is prepared to authorize a joint task force. We cannot allow the hegemony to destabilize galactic peace." Admiral Chen nodded slowly. "Mr. Chen, given your unique partnership and your proven track record, I'm offering you a choice. You can return to your private security work, or you can accept a commission as a special operations coordinator." Your mission would be to locate and neutralize the hegemony research facility. Marcus looked down at Shadow, feeling the creature's eagerness through their bond. They had found their purpose, their place in a galaxy that had seemed to have no need for old soldiers and forgotten experiments. We accept, Marcus said simply. 6 weeks later, Marcus and Shadow led a joint task force assault on a hidden hegemony facility in the Outer Rim. The battle was swift and decisive, ending with the destruction of all research data and the capture of the facility's leadership. In the aftermath, as they stood among the smoking ruins of what could have been the galaxy's greatest threat, Marcus reflected on the strange turns his life had taken. A gift meant as an insult had become a partnership that saved countless lives. A creature designed as a weapon had become a force for peace. King Veltar's gift had indeed changed everything, just not in the way the alien monarch had intended. As they prepared to return to Terminus Station, Ambassador Velnara approached them one final time. The Galactic Council wishes to offer you both permanent positions, she said. Your unique abilities make you invaluable assets. Marcus scratched Shadow behind the ears, feeling the creature's contentment through their bond. Thanks, but I think we'll stick with what we're doing. There are plenty of problems in the galaxy that need solving, and we seem to be pretty good at solving them. Shadow looked up at him with those amber eyes, and Marcus felt the creature's agreement. They were partners, equals, friends. They had found their place in the universe, and it was exactly where they belonged. Together, they walked toward their transport, ready for whatever challenges the galaxy might throw at them next. After all, they had already proved that there was no problem too complex, no enemy too dangerous, and no situation too impossible for a human and his Shadowhound to handle. King Veltar had been right about one thing: his gift had definitely been educational. It had taught the galaxy that sometimes the most unlikely partnerships could change the course of history itself.